Greetings and welcome to the ROI Clear podcast. This is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Mr. John Casmon. John Casmon is a multifamily syndicator. He specializes in providing cash flow and tax benefits to professionals. That's straight from his LinkedIn banner. So we're going to dig into that, and we're going to dig into some more things about this man's background. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. John Casmon. Welcome, John.
Hey, Ray, thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. It's great to talk to you, and I'm excited for our time today.
Yeah, very, very glad to have you here as well. And as I've shared with other people before, you were one of the first people I met in the multifamily syndication business. We met during a very cold February in February of 2020 at the Best Ever Conference in Keystone, Colorado. So, little did we know that that would be our last conference for a while, because after that, there was a shutdown, right? But it's good to see you. I've followed your career. I've enjoyed following your career and everything you're doing. So good to have you here. To kick things off, I'm going to ask you to do an elevator pitch, and I'll say to those who are new to ROI Clear, John is on an elevator with someone he wants to influence. John, what would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
Well, depending on that individual, what I would want to talk to them about is kind of what we do and how we help people. So I might say, hey, I'm John, what do you do? And when they ask me what I do, I would say, we help everyday professionals make money, save money, and create wealth. How do we do that? We do that through investing in commercial real estate that cash flows, goes up in value, and it's desirable. So we have great tax benefits, and we can also help you create long-term wealth for you and your family. And that's what we do. We focus on cash flowing properties in great markets, great locations, but we have a long-term outlook. So we focus on areas that tend to go up in value over the long haul with an investment, thesis that is focused on cash flow first and appreciation second.
Yes. All right. Now, what markets would you say that you're looking on? Because I know you're not going to go everywhere. What are you looking for? What attributes are you looking for, and what markets are you in?
So we focus mostly in the Midwest. And when I say the Midwest, we are still focused on growth markets. Some people hear Midwest and they think sleepy towns or the Rust Belt. And that's simply not the case all around, right? So there are markets that are growing, like Indianapolis, Columbus, Cincinnati, Louisville. These are markets that are seeing population growth, job growth, industry diversification. They're seeing all the things we like about growth and jobs and development, but they're more affordable and they're more resilient than some of those swing markets. I know you're out there in the West Coast there in the Arizona market. And Arizona is a great market, but it does tend to go up and down a little bit more, right? It has more wild swings versus in the Midwest, it's a little bit more stable, a little bit more predictable, and it's easier for us to kind of focus on both the short term, midterm, and long term with our investments here.
Got it. Now, what is it about the Midwest that makes it so stable? What is it about that place? Is it the fact that great people are born there? I was born in Chicago, so I imagine Chicago's the greatest place there. But what is it that makes it so stable?
Yeah, Chicago's a great place. I lived in Chicago for 8 years, and it's a great town. Chicago plays more like other big cities, though, when it comes to, population and things like that. And again, you were born there, you left. I'm not from there, but I did live there for a while, and then I left.
Yeah.
And where did I come back? I came back to Ohio, right? I'm from Cleveland. My wife's from Cincinnati. And what ends up happening with people in the Midwest is this is home. This is where their family is. They want to be around family. So even when they leave and go off to college or get a good job, once they start to really, have families and settle down and want to plant roots, they start to think about where they want to raise their family. And that's where I think that upbringing starts to come back home for them, because most people enjoy their upbringing. They had a great time growing up in places like Ohio, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan. So they want to raise their family in a similar way that they were brought up. And when you're out there in, say, LA or Chicago or New York, that's great when you're single, great when you're, playing a corporate game and trying to climb the corporate ladder and all of that. But you think about, the values you want to instill into your children and, the being around family, grandparents, cousins, all of that, those ties tend to bring people back home. So those people be close to family. I think the difference, and I'll California and Arizona as an example, a lot of times when people leave to go out there, well, they're going because of weather or jobs, right?
Hmm.
There's great job growth there. They're going there. When people tend to come to the Midwest, it's still jobs, but a lot of time it's familial ties. You know, they're coming back to be closer
Mm.
to family. They're coming back to be around loved ones. So those are the things that are, you know, a bit more predictable because people are trying to settle down here and they want to stay closer to their family and those roots.
Yeah, that's powerful. Some of the people that I talk to, they immediately jump towards who the employers are and how much money people can make and that type of thing. But it's interesting, your approach, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but your approach, it seems that part of what's driving your market selection is that, you know, is this a place where people want to live because of their familial ties?
Yeah,
That's
and listen, jobs are everywhere, right? So I mean, we
right,
can go any market, and you and I can go about, you know, major employers, right? I can go Eli
right.
Lilly, I can talk McDonald's, I can talk, you know, here in Cincinnati, we got Procter and Gamble, we got Fifth Third. So they're big companies, right, in every market. So for me, it's well, why this market versus that market? Well, now we have to start digging a little bit deeper. And for me, it's the psychographic element of it. Because now I'm not
Mm,
talking about a specific city, I'm talking about a region. And that's what drives this region versus when you
right.
think about maybe the East Coast, or you think about the Southeast, or you think about the West Coast. The things that are driving that region may be a little different, and some of those things may be more cyclical. For instance, in the tech industry, you know, if tech is booming, well, you saw a lot of people leaving, you know, not just California, but you know, Northern California, leaving San Francisco, moving
Yeah.
to Phoenix, where they're now creating tech hubs there. There's this big push where you see Miami creating their own tech hubs. You see a lot of,
Mm,
you know, cities and states starting to drive in this technology space because they're trying to attract certain jobs, certain companies, you know, the Googles, all those different things. And those things are great. And you want to be in municipalities where they're focused on growth, they're focused on the, you know, the business development of that overall climate. But I
hmm.
also think that while people do go for jobs, they also, and this is really, I think, a change from COVID, when you are working from home or you're spending more time in your house, you realize that that's a little bit more important, particularly when you get to a certain age in life.
Hmm.
And I think we are seeing people who have valued being in a home where they have a yard where they can run around and play and, you know, have
Yes.
kids and have a home office, and you know, and that, I don't think that's going to go away. I think people really do value, you know, having their own space, and that is a change that we didn't see as much in 2018, 2019, where people were, they were fine living in a 400 square foot apartment because their whole plan was they're going to be out the whole time. And
Right,
now they're
right.
like, you know what? I kind of would like some space of my own. I don't want to have to share everything. If we ever do go through another lockdown, I don't want
Yeah.
to be in this little tight box
Hmm.
and, you know, pay $2,000 in rent for this tiny apartment where I
Right.
could go and have this, you know, a lot of space and a lot of the amenities if I were to move somewhere else.
Yeah. I like the way you look ahead. The vision is very clear. Let's talk a little bit about your focus as a business, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about Casmon Capital specifically.
Yeah.
Your the tagline that I see is that you specialize in providing cash flow and tax benefits for professionals. Would you say that more of your investors want cash flow, or do more of them want tax benefits? Do they want a little bit of both? Why do people want to talk to you and engage you?
That's a great question. So I think when I'm talking to prospective investors, first of all, they may not think of themselves as investors, right? These are regular everyday people who have, you know, good jobs and they're trying to figure out their future.
Yeah.
So they know they have some money, they have some money sitting in the bank, right? And they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And typically they've had in the stock market, they've got some money in 401ks.
Mhm.
They've always been interested in real estate. Maybe they bought a rental property, maybe they flipped a house, but they
Mhm.
believe in real estate. They just don't really have the time, energy, or the passion to do everything that it takes to be a successful real estate investor themselves, right? So there's
Mhm.
an interest there. And they're interested in all those things, right? They want the cash flow, they want the appreciation, they want the tax benefits, but they also want to diversify from the stock market because the stock market can be a roller coaster, and they recognize that. And you know, there's the old saying that 90% of the world's millionaires, you know, own real estate, and they
Mhm.
recognize that, you know what, maybe I should have real estate in my portfolio. So when we're talking to them, we're trying to help them understand that balance because you can go chase one of those things. And I don't, you know, for most people, their best approach is kind of a balanced approach, which means you
Mm,
want a blend of cash flow and appreciation. And that's one of the reasons we like kind of our markets in the Midwest, because these are growth markets in the Midwest, but they also do have cash flow and they have value. A different strategy, for instance, would be if you are looking at new developments in California.
mm,
There's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to get cash flow if there isn't a property that exists, because it's got to be developed first,
yes.
and you're in a high cost market. So in that case, you're really playing appreciation, right? You're waiting on the
Mm-hmm.
back end to make money. I remember I interviewed this woman on my show once, and she was investing in Seattle, and she told me she loses money every month on her properties. And I was like, really? She's like, yes, I lose money every month, and it's great. And I said, wow, that is a strategy.
And it's
And her
great.
right. And her point, her strategy was every month, every year, that property was going up in value. And because it
Mm,
was Seattle, that property will be worth so much more in the future that it was worth it. Now,
mm-hmm.
my philosophy is I think that's personally dangerous because we are now speculating. We're
Yes.
hoping, and hope is not a strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, we look for in place cash flow. I want to make money as I own this thing, right? But I also do want it to go up in value over time. So I'm looking at the demand. I'm looking at the outlying factors. How many people are moving here? What jobs are coming here? What developments are going on here? Is this place more desirable and will be more desirable in the future than it is today? Those are the things that I'm looking at when making these investments. But I also want that cash flow out of the gate. I want a business plan where I can drive that cash flow,
Mm,
I can drive that value. And then I want to pick when we leave and exit this project. To me, that is the right way to invest, where you get that great blend of cash flow appreciation, and then the tax benefits. The tax benefits are they're comparable across most multifamily deals. What we're typically looking for, though, is we're looking at a plan where we can reduce our investors' tax liability. We can help
mm-hmm.
get them connected to tax professionals. I think sometimes people, they talk to their CPA and they think their CPA knows everything. And I would
Oh.
say that's like, that's like talking to anybody who's got, you know, MD on their name and assuming they know everything there is about anything with your body. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to go to a professional, right? Just because you go to a general doctor or a practitioner, it doesn't mean that they're a foot specialist, or it doesn't mean that they're a heart surgeon. So you really want to talk to those people who understand tax strategy, tax. So about the tax benefit, CPAs they don't know
Mm-hmm.
what cost is, they don't know depreciation is, don't understand qualify to be a real professional. They don't understand some of these different strategies that you can employ to lower and reduce your tax liability. So from that standpoint, we have some things we can offer, but we also have our network. So depending on that person's situation, it's like, okay, hey, you know what? Talk to my guy here. I'm not saying you got to hire him, but talk to him, get some ideas, get some concepts, and then take that back to your person. And do they understand them? Are they familiar with them? Have they seen this before? Do they invest in real estate? But you've got to make sure that you are setting yourself up to be successful and to keep more of the hard earned money you make. And so many people that we work with, they're not aware of these things, right? Because most of us are taught to go get a good job, work that good job, get raises, get promotions, and that's what you do. And then you just sit there one day like, all right, I got this money. How do I maximize this? And that's when you start to learn all these next level strategies from talking to folks like myself, talking to folks like you, to learn how we are able to drive a higher return on that investment beyond just cash flow and even appreciation.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You spend a fair amount of time talking to people who got the good job, got the degree, got the good job. They're sitting there putting money into an IRA a little bit at a time, and at the end of 25 years, they get a gold watch.
Yeah.
But does that gold watch appreciate the way an investment in one of Casmon Capital's deals would appreciate? So you got to look at that. And I love what you mentioned. You said that you want to decide when you exit the property. If you acquire it right, you can, if you acquire it right, you'll have cash flow, and then you can decide when you exit. You choose when you go in, you choose when you go out. So you can control a little bit of the appreciation by choosing when you exit. And if it's a bad time to exit, it's all right because you've got cash flow going on. I
Yeah,
love that approach.
one of the best things I ever heard about real estate investing, particularly multifamily and longer term rentals, is that the value really only matters on 2 days: the day you buy it and the day you sell it. So if you can
Yes.
control the day you sell it, it doesn't matter, right? It's like, again, you watch the stock market, you can go and look and see, oh, the stock's down 10%
Yeah,
today,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that
yeah.
anxiety might build up and you're freaking out, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you've got even a house, right? If you have a rental and the residents are paying rent, you're not worried about how much is my rental worth today, right?
Yeah,
You got the rent, you paid the bills,
right,
great, and you do that long enough, over time, it's going to go up in value. So then whenever it makes sense for you to sell, that's when you can start to figure out, okay, what is it worth?
right.
Ah, it's not enough. Oh, well, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, wow, it's worth that. You know what? I think it's about time for me to retire, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
beauty of it versus if you got a stock, even if you can control the day you sell, that anxiety of knowing that, oh, it dropped 10% today, or it went up
Mm-hmm.
3% today, like that can kick in on a lot of people. And there's a lot of psychological elements to it and document, and research and all that stuff. So I think that's a good thing about multifamily too, is that you can kind of, weather the storms because you're not constantly being reminded of the current value every single day. So you can really just focus on running the business, making money, taking care of your properties. And I think that's really good for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Not reminded of the value every day. Yeah. Warren Buffett talks about that. There's some people who look at the stock market, they're looking at their stock, it's going up and down, and he says, uh, short term, the stock market's really just an opinion machine. Long term, it's a weighing machine, but short term, it's an opinion machine. But what you're saying about real estate, one advantage is that if you're getting that cash flow, yeah, okay, maybe the opinion is down, but I don't really care because this is not the day I bought and it's not the day I sold. I'm getting the cash flow anyway. So that works. But at least if you're outside of California, that's it. It's a little bit different. It's a little
Yeah.
bit different right there.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase. I've heard this before, but I've got to repeat it because you said it here. Hope is not a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's it. And I think it's interesting you say that now because there's so many people where if you break down, what their game plan is, it really is just hope. They hope interest rates come down. They hope
Mm,
cap rates drop. They hope, people are willing to pay more in rent, right? They hope rent growth continues. That's not going to get you there. So you got to
right.
look at what you can actually control and make the best decisions with that information. And I think that's what savvy operators are doing today. I think as an investor, hoping you can save up money to buy a house next year. Well, people have been doing that for the last 5 years, right?
Yes.
So the market's been quote unquote hot for 5 years now. So
Yeah.
hoping it cools off, like, listen, figure out where things are today, what you can afford, what you can control, and control those things. And start to put in those levers, right? I mean, if you have concerns, address those concerns. So I go back to the whole cash flow thing. If you're concerned with high interest rates now and that's hurting your deals, well, make sure that the deal still cash flows. If it
Mm-hmm.
cash flows even in the midst of high interest rates, then you'll be fine if interest rates come down. So there are ways that you can still navigate and certainly may limit your options, but just hoping that things change, that certainly isn't going to get you very far.
Yeah. It's like if you look out and you see that it's raining, carry an umbrella with you. Have a strategy, have a way to deal with what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Now, connect the dots, will you, between your earlier career and what you're doing as an investor? I mean, you have a marketing background, looking at your resume, you've been with large companies, mid-sized companies, and then you started a company. Can you tell us a little bit about your history there?
Yeah, so I started off in corporate America doing marketing and advertising. So worked at a couple of agencies, advertising agencies, and then I was working on the General Motors account as one of my clients. And one of the guys who was my client, he got promoted, and they were looking to backfill his position. And my name came up, and they called me and said, "Hey, man, we want you for this job. Come apply." I applied and got to General Motors and worked there for about 4.5 years. And I was there from 2007 to 2011. So I was there
Mm-hmm.
through bankruptcy. And
Oh,
it really shaped my view on work, corporate America, investing, control. all of those different things. So to give you context, picture, and most of you remember what that time was like, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm working at GM. I'm watching my boss's boss's boss on cable news, right? So I'm looking at her in the office at 4 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock, she's on cable news talking about, the industry
Mm.
and the level of anxiety that that place had, not just me, but all of my peers. And keep in mind, I
Mm-hmm.
was young in my career. So for me, I kind of was naive enough and probably accurate, but I was like, okay, this is bad, but
Mm.
worst case, I'll get another job and I'll be okay. I didn't have kids, I wasn't married, I could figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I had peers who this was their life. There was no
Yeah.
plan B. And they were born and
Yes.
raised in Detroit. What I just tell you about people from the Midwest, right? These are people who were born and raised in Detroit. Their whole family is there. If you're born and
Right.
raised in Detroit, one of the best jobs you could get is in the automotive industry. And
Oh,
not
yes.
just in the industry, at General Motors, at
Right.
headquarters, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
these were prestigious jobs that people had. And we had no idea what was going to happen with the fate of the company. So picture making 200, 300, $400,000 a year, um, and not knowing if your company was going to be in business, a
Mm.
company of that magnitude. And even if the company was, your job might have been on the line. And what were
Sure.
your options there, right?
Yeah.
Especially for these people that set up roots there, had never lived outside of, this area.
And their
It's
expenses have
challenging.
caught up to that 200K a
The
year, right?
lifestyles there, and
Yes.
lifestyles there, kids there, there's an expectation for all of that, private schools, everything, right?
Right.
So that level of anxiety was just wild. And I for me, I would spend a lot of time talking to these people and looking at them and working with them. And there were a few bright spots. And there was one guy in particular who always had a smile on his face and always had a great mood, great spirit. And I'm like, man, amongst this like chaos, this dude was still cool as a cucumber, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love talking to him because when you've got that kind of stress around, you need someone who can bring levity and kind of keep things a little bit light. So I love
Mm-hmm.
just in the morning, I would go check in. His name was Jack. So I check
Mm-hmm.
in. Jack, what's going on? How you doing today? And Jack's an older gentleman, man, older white guy. And he would just sit down, hey, John, and we just talk. And the thing that I learned from Jack was one, you control what you can control. He
Mm-hmm.
couldn't control the bankruptcy and none of that stuff. Right? He could pull the reports that people were asking for, but we had the car czar come in, all that kind of stuff, and um, he didn't let that stuff get to him. He's like, I'm gonna do my job,
Mm-hmm.
and if they decide one day I'm not in the plans, cool. And he
Mm.
could say that because he had built up his own reservoir. He had his own
Yes.
real estate investments. He had property out in Utah. He loved skiing and jet skiing, so he would take his stuff out there. And that was really the first person who I saw who I'm not gonna say it on the show, but it's FU money, right?
Yeah, right, right.
But he was the first person who I kind of saw who had it, who
Mm-hmm.
did his job well, but he
Mm-hmm.
had FU money, so he could approach
Yeah.
his job really with the best version of himself, right? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of people want to quit their job, right? They want to get into real estate to quit their job, and he didn't have that approach. He loved what he was doing.
Mm.
He just wanted to be able to show up as his best self because he didn't have the pressure of if I lose this job, then that. So he could make decisions that were truly based on what he felt was the best decision.
Yeah.
And so many times in corporate America and in life, people do the thing that's safe. Well, what's safe? The safe thing is defer. I'm not going to make any controversial decision. I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
anything that could be a game changer. I don't want to be a maverick. What? No, we're going to get consensus. If we do something, I want everybody in this room to agree that we're doing it. So I don't take the
Right.
heat, right? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it happens at a lot of big corporations. And it was just wild living like that. So I just learned a lot from Jack when I went to smaller companies that really appreciated more of that independent thinking and leadership. That helped me grow tremendously because I did
Mm-hmm.
feel, um, you know, limited in what we could do being at a big company because there's obviously a lot of bureaucracy there. But even within that bureaucracy, I mean, we thrived. I mean, I worked on a Buick team. We're the fastest growing brand in America.
Mm.
We were recognized by industry publications. I've been quoted in the New York Times. I was recognized as one of the top marketing and advertising professionals by Black Enterprise Magazine. So I had a lot of success at that space, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to learn how to be more like Jack, right? How to become an
Mm. Yes.
entrepreneur. I wanted to be able to have more and more leeway. So I went to a smaller agency from there, worked with the CEO very closely on just all of those kind of things. And then eventually I did launch my own company. And for me, I always go back to that time at GM. And the reason I spent so much time telling that story is I wonder if I was in the shoes of one of my peers at that time, if I had family, like what would my options be?
Hmm.
And when we built Casmon Capital, we really had that person in mind. You know, if I could go back 10 years ago, helping these people learn how real estate can help them have more options, you know, have a little bit more levity to your life because you've got other investments that can help, you know, keep you sustained along the way. And if this is something that you want to do full time, great. If you just want to have some extra passive income come through so you could take a little longer vacation or cut your retirement age, you know, down by a few years, that's great too. But real
Hmm.
estate is a very powerful tool. I think it's really important for people to learn how to use it for themselves. And I think everyone should be investing in real estate. They just need to figure out the how, whether it's
Hmm.
completely passively through private lending or syndications, whether it's completely actively like doing flips or owning their own rentals. And there's a whole lot in between. So just figure out how real estate or what real estate strategy is best for you. But I think it's a powerful tool to help people.
Yeah. Amazing. You had multiple influences there. You had Jack with his forget you money. I think that's what it stands for. That's forget you, right? And
That's
then
the PG version. Yes.
yeah, there it is. And then there were the negatives too. You saw the anxiety. You could see, as you said, your boss's boss. You went through many layers, who was on TV expressing that anxiety. You see this person every day, and then they're on the cable news shows, the cable finance shows, expressing that anxiety. And it is, yeah, it's eye-opening. And fortunately, you were a young man, not married yet, not having kids yet, so you were able to make some decisions. Did you start investing in real estate while you were still in corporate America and going through and working with the advertising firm, or when did you start?
I did. So part of my strategy was I actually wanted to start while we were going through bankruptcy because I
Yeah.
remember Rich Dad Poor Dad, and
Yes.
I'm like, all right, I got it. I mean, real estate. Okay, I gotta invest in real estate. So I had
Yep.
read
Yep.
Rich Dad Poor Dad before, and I was like, that's it. What I didn't realize was I was in Detroit in 2008. so,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so
Hindsight will
every
tell you that. Yeah. You'll know that in
right.
hindsight. Yeah.
So everybody I knew, and keep in mind, I didn't know any real estate investors. So
Yeah.
if I came across someone who owned real estate, even a one rental, I would latch on to them. Tell me, how'd you get it? Where'd
Yes.
you get it? What'd you do? How'd you do it? Right.
Yeah.
And every single one of them that I would meet was trying to sell it at a fire sale crackhead price. Like,
Oh.
so and if you remember, this is back when they were doing like, properties for like $1 and $10 in Detroit.
Yeah,
So
in
they were
Detroit. I remember
they
that
were
happening.
they were
Yes.
so they were giving away properties, right?
Right.
So
Right.
as a person who had never invested, it just started to realize like nobody wants these properties. There's probably a reason, John. Like I don't think this is where your journey should start. This feels like, maybe not the best place to be investing in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind,
Mm.
I've got the anxiety from living here, and everything I'm reading is this is like the worst place in the country to be at this time.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
all that anxiety is kicking on me too. So eventually I decided I was going to move. I wanted to move to Chicago. Once I moved to Chicago and worked for this other advertising agency,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I kicked my plan into place, started looking at properties. I rented the first year I was there, saved up some money, and then bought my first investment property that second year.
Wonderful. All right. Bought that first investment prop. This was multifamily, single family. What kind of
That
deal
was
was it?
this was a duplex, and then from there
Yes.
we bought more smaller multifamily right after that.
Excellent. When did you decide you wanted to do syndications?
So I bought a 2 unit, a 3 unit, an 8 unit building, and then I started to do a flip project. But when I bought that 8 unit building, I felt something very different than the previous purchases. I bought that 2 unit. I was anxious, I was scared, I was excited. The 3 unit, I was mostly excited, and
Mm-hmm.
the 8 unit, I was almost depressed,
Mm.
and I should say depressed, maybe dejected. And the reason was I knew this strategy was working, but my wife and I just had to save. We sacrificed a lot to save money to buy these properties.
Mm-hmm.
And all I could think about was how long it was going to take me to save another, 150,000 to buy the next property,
Right.
and I was like, "Oh, man, it's probably gonna take another year and a half, 2 years before we can make." And that's when I realized that, okay, maybe there's a better way, because
Mm-hmm.
I knew my strategy was working.
Right.
But to give you a little context, the main reason I started investing in real estate was I didn't want to have the fear of losing my job, like, my colleagues when I was at GM.
Mm-hmm.
While I
Right.
was buying these properties, because I was saving up all of our money and then buying the property, what was happening is I was equity rich, but I was actually cash flow poor.
Yep.
So I've got $150,000. I use that as my down payment, right? And my salary was around 150,000 at this time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I put
Mm-hmm.
that as my down payment. So great, I now have this property, but it was cash on like maybe $2,000 a month or something, whatever it was like maybe two thousand
Right.
dollars a month. That wasn't enough to pay all my bills. So part of it for me was like, okay, it's great that I got this equity and we're creating value, but the whole premise of this was have enough passive income to cover all of my bills, and I'm not really doing that. So that's when I started to warm up to other options. I started thinking more about work with, they call it OPM, right? Other people's money. We're
Mm-hmm.
raising capital,
Right.
and the trigger that really helped me significantly was I had a couple of friends who were interested in what I was doing, and I would tell them how to do what I was doing.
Mm.
And I would be super excited. I'm like, oh, there's a dude. You go here. Here's where you find the properties. You got to get this
Yeah.
person here. Read this book. Check out this podcast. Read this article. And they would be like, yeah, I'm not doing all of that.
Right.
There was, and one of them said, hey, man, yeah, if you find one though, or your next one, why don't you just let me know, man? Maybe I'll partner with you. And the light bulb kind of went off
Light
to
bulb.
say, oh, well, that's what I need. Because my problem was I didn't want to wait and raise 130 or 150K. I just wanted someone to bring half the money. Like, let me bring half, you bring
Right.
half, and I can go
Right.
twice as fast, right? I can get
Yep. Yep.
twice as many properties. So that's when I started to really say, okay, this could be something more than maybe what I was originally thinking. I
Mm-hmm.
sat down with a couple of people who were more experienced in that space. They opened my eyes further, and eventually I hired a mentor, and that really opened up the doors for us to
Mm.
launch what we have now as Casmon Capital Group.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful path. Started off smaller, two duplex, and then went to your 8 unit, wanted to do much larger properties. While it's going to take a while to save up that equity piece, that down payment. But then, in the middle of this, you had built up expertise. It's funny, while you were in the middle of that, you almost built up that expertise, um, not subconsciously, but you were building it up through actively doing it. You were learning kinesthetically, not you were reading books, but then beyond the books, you were actively doing it by putting your boots on the ground and doing it. And there were others who saw your expertise, would ask you questions. They came to admire your expertise, and there's your first investors.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, if you would have asked me, I wouldn't even think about using the word like expertise, right? But we sometimes don't give ourselves enough credit for the journey we've been on, the knowledge
Yeah.
we've accumulated until you stop
Yes.
and pause and really, put it down and to play it
Right.
back. That journey, I mean, it officially started in 2008, right? But it really started back in like early 2002 when I
Yeah.
first read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I did some other things we didn't talk about with the group home that I bought. And then eventually when I bought that first property, but keep in mind, before that first property, I was attending RIA events. I was reading
Mm.
articles. I was, reading books. I was trying to network and talk to anybody I could. If I'm serious, if someone told me you were a real estate investor and I could track you down, I would track you down, right? I mean,
Yes.
I would, because I didn't know anyone who did it. So for me, the only way to learn was to talk to other people. And the books were great, but I didn't know these people. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the people in the books. I didn't know the author of the book. So to meet real people that I could sit across from and ask questions, that was so powerful to me because it made it real. It made it tangible. And then when
Right.
I became an investor, and I'm talking to other investors, and now we're having different kind of conversations because now I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about, hey, what are you doing for security deposits? Or hey, I've got two
Mm-hmm.
units moving out this month. How do you do that? Oh, you should stagger them next time. So, this one, put them on a 14-month lease or give them a bonus. So now I'm learning the little nuances. So over time, you fast forward 3, 4, 5 years, you put 13 units on there. By the time I got to working with other investors, I had actually acquired a ton of knowledge, real experience, personal firsthand experience, a lot of
Right.
secondhand experience from all these conversations, the articles, the podcast, the blogs, all these things. And then by the time I started working with other people, I launched my own podcast. So
Right.
now I'm talking and at my own meetup. So now I'm
Yes.
having hundreds and hundreds of conversations every year. I've had thousands. I've done 550 plus podcast episodes. I've had a meetup for 7 years. I've done 3 conferences that I've run. I'm not even talking about attending other people's stuff.
Yes. Right.
That's
Right.
content
This is, yeah.
I've created.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
think about just regular conversations with other investors,
Mm.
phone calls. I've had thousands of real estate conversations and interactions.
Mm.
So when you say the expertise or an expert reaction back and on a title like, but if you step back and actually and the level of knowledge that has been accumulated over all of that time, it's like, well, I still wouldn't call it that, but the reality is I know probably more than 98 to 99% of the people on this planet, right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to real estate investing.
Right.
So
In that
that's
industry.
that's
Yeah.
just the truth of the matter based on the work that I've put in over the last 7 or 8 years.
Right. Okay. I get it. Yep. You got your 10,000 hours and
Working
then
towards my
some. You got
10,000
your
hours.
10,000 hours and then some.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you push back at me calling you an expert, I push back against your pushback and it's my show. So there we go. So
Well,
you, sir, are an expert.
I appreciate it. And here's the thing. What I would say is I think it's really important, and I'd say this no matter who I'm talking to. I think it's really important for us to, one, I don't want to say be humble, but to be aware that we can always know more and learn more,
Mm,
and to
mm,
continue to be on a path of that enlightenment, but
yes.
also for us not to discredit our own knowledge and our own experiences just because someone else has more. And
Mm-hmm.
my first flip project, it went terribly wrong. And the reason it went terribly wrong is I deferred to someone else because they were the quote unquote expert.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I
Yeah.
had read some books on flipping houses, right? I had
Mm-hmm.
talked to Jay Scott and he gave me some stuff. And so I had my 70% rules. I had all my stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I had never flipped a house a day in my life. So when I'm talking to someone who had flipped, dozens of homes, um, I deferred, even though what he was saying was against the stuff I had read in my studies. I deferred. And lo and behold, I would have been right. He was wrong, and I lost money in
Mm,
those slips. And I would tell you too, like if someone is going to tell you something different than what you've studied, they should be able to explain it.
mm-hmm.
They should be able to help you understand their position or how they're mitigating risk and how they're mitigating losses.
Mm.
And if they can, then feel free to move forward with someone like that. But if they can't, then that should be someone you maybe move a little more cautiously with or avoid at that particular time.
Oh, yes. That's excellent advice for getting advice. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that. That is, and I know our audience is grateful for that too. We are, we've been talking for a while. I'm enjoying listening to you, but we do have to wrap up, and we got to have you back on the podcast again because there's a lot more I could ask you about. My list of questions, there's still others there, but I like the way you answer very thoroughly, and you also provide real world examples. So grateful for that. That's always good. As we wrap up, I want to ask you, what is it that you've read or what is it that you're reading that you would want to recommend to our audience?
So I think this is really great for your ROI Clear audience, but 10x is better than 2x is a book that I
Yes.
recently finished. I think we just talked about this, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yes.
I think it's a great read. The There's the author does like this opening. I don't know if you call it a monologue, but it's the opening piece, and they talk about uh,
Michelangelo, that one?
Michelangelo,
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Michelangelo,
yes.
and how he became such a great artist. Um, and I think it was really telling, and it's a story that I hadn't heard told like that. And I think it was really powerful. And beyond that, for all of us just to recognize what it truly takes to get to the next level. And some of us will stumble upon it, but there is kind of a blueprint to that. And instead of what we're taught in corporate, which is typically, let's try to be a little better than we were last year, right? Let's 5% increase, 10% increase, 2%, whatever it is. If someone were to come in and say, yeah, I need you to 10x what you did last year.
Yes.
Maybe not in a year, maybe in 2 or 3 years. And by the way, your top client, fire them, right? And instead focus on this. Like, most people would, just lose it. And I really enjoyed that book just because too, I thought about my entire life experience from being at GM, right? It's like, if we thought about the products that made us the most money, and if we eliminated the other stuff, we never would have went through bankruptcy, right?
Sure. Yes.
But we had 8 brands, we had a car for everybody, and we just said, you know what? These are our most profitable vehicles. We literally were making cars that lost us money, right? So if
make it up in volume, it loses money, but make it up in volume.
So if we just focused on, those, we would have been a much stronger. So all those lessons I think are really clear. And, for me, it's a reminder too, like, what am I doing each day? What's producing the most value? What should I cut out? What can I offload? What should we just eliminate? Say we're not doing that anymore. So I thought that book was very powerful, and I would recommend it to anybody looking to grow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We will include that in the show notes. We're big fans of that book too. So we'll include that. And then finally, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, listen, if you're interested in real estate investing, we've got a sample deal package on our website. You can go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. We also have our podcast called Multifamily Insights, and some other resources on the website too. So just go to casmoncapital.com.
Thank you, John Casmon. Thank you for being with us here on the ROI Clear podcast. It has been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Hey, Ray, thank you for having me, man. Always a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Yes.